morning, everybody from Mission Control Houston. Welcome to Space Station Live for Wednesday, June 26, 2013. This is a live view inside the International Space Station's flight control room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The Expedition 36 crew is busy today, as well as his team down here in Houston. They're being led by Flight Director Brian Smith. The Capcom, which is the voice you'll hear up to the crew, is Serena Anand. The Expedition 36 crew on board the orbiting complex is being led by Commander Pavel Vinogradov. He is there second from the left. On the far left-hand side is Alexander Mazurkin. Standing there in the middle is Chris Cassidy, NASA astronaut. Right beside him, also in the middle, Luca Parmitano from the European Space Agency. Second from the right there is Fyodor Yurchikhin. And there on the far right-hand side is Karen Nyberg. As we talked about yesterday, Yurchikhin and Mazurkin had wrapped up a spacewalk earlier this week, 6 hours, 34 minutes, both of them venturing outside the Russian segment of the International Space Station. They still had some cleanup activities today, also had a quick chat with the ground team to sort of take a look back at the spacewalk and talk about how it worked, and also to look ahead at the next spacewalk that's coming up in August. This crew had quite a number of activities that they needed to get accomplished on Monday. They pretty much checked off everything off the list. The majority of this activity is getting ready for the brand new Russian multi-purpose laboratory module. That module is going to be coming up to the International Space Station later on this year. It's actually going to be replacing the Pirs docking compartment, which is back there on the Russian segment. That is actually going to be jettisoned at some point, and we'll say farewell to the International Space Station. That is one of the oldest pieces of the orbiting complex. But this multi-purpose laboratory module that is coming up will offer a little bit more room for experiments and also vehicle arrivals and departures as well. They also opened up the hatch today in between the Zvezda service module and the Progress 50 that is part of the International Space Station. You see it back there. That actually is attached to the Pirs docking compartment currently. That Progress got up to the station with 2.5 tons of supplies back in February. It will depart coming up in July and will be replaced by yet another Progress here in the next couple of months, bringing more supplies and food and experiments for the crew. Things also beginning to get ramped up for the upcoming 2 spacewalks that will be conducted by Chris Cassidy and Luca Parmitano. There is Cassidy working with Karen Nyberg in the Quest airlock earlier today. Cassidy, Parmitano, and Nyberg, all three of them have been working inside that portion of the International Space Station to get the spacesuits and the tools ready to go for those upcoming spacewalks. The first one will be on July 9th. The second one will be on July 16th. We will have a news conference from here at the Johnson Space Center on July 2nd to take a look at both of those spacewalks. That will air at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on NASA television. The David Korth, who is the flight director for both of those spacewalks, as well as both spacewalk officers for each one of them, will be here as well to look ahead at what's on task for both Chris Cassidy and Luca Parmitano as they get ready to step outside the U.S. segment of the International Space Station. They have quite a number of activities they need to get accomplished during both of those EVAs. Transfer work is also continuing in between the Albert Einstein Automated Transfer Vehicle, which is back on the Russian end of the International Space Station. That is the Zvezda service module you see there down below the ATV. This brought up more than 7 tons of supplies to the International Space Station crew. 7.3 tons to be exact. You see the entire layout of ATV there on the screen. The crew is way ahead of the timeline in terms of the cargo transfer. They're more than 50% complete with everything, and they're taking basically about half the amount of time that they have allocated to them. So they're working fast and feverishly to get everything unloaded from the Einstein ATV. They will pack it full of items that are no longer needed, and ultimately that ATV will be undocked and deorbited down into the Earth's atmosphere. Outside the International Space Station today, there's also some robotic activities taking place. There is a good shot of the Dexter robot on the end of the station's giant 58-foot robotic arm. Dexter is being put through the paces this week. That activity actually started yesterday, but today they're going to be testing to see if Dexter can open up some of the bay doors on the outside of the station's truss, specifically there on the S0 truss. That's the starboard truss, sort of toward the middle of the station, but you see these arms being moved. Dexter's arms are fairly long. They're about 11 feet each. Dexter itself is about 12 feet tall, so quite a very large robot there on the outside of the station that hopefully once it gets tested and checks out could be used to perform some repair and replace techniques of different items, such as the sort of the circuit boxes that are part of the station's power structure. Maybe one of these days it could be used to replace some ammonia tanks or anything such as that that the crews have had to do in the past. But Dexter's checkout will continue through the rest of this week. On tomorrow, on Thursday, they're going to be checking to see if it can remove some bolts using a new technique that is typically not used. And then on Friday, they will stow it back into its safe configuration, and hopefully all those checkout activities will go according to plan. Finally, today, the crew has several different crew Earth observation opportunities down on the ground. This is a chance for them to take a look at the planet below and to take photos and video if they can as they pass over certain man-made and natural phenomena and landmarks. They're going to be passing over parts of Rwanda today, as well as Damascus, Syria. They're going to be passing over parts of Armenia, as well as Andorra, and also the Sierra El Tigre, which is a section of Mexico, and also over the state of Kansas here in the United States. If you would like to take a look at any of these photos that the crew gathers, also take a look at what your city, your home city, looks like down on the ground below. Just log on to eol.jsc.nasa.gov. Once again, eol.jsc.nasa.gov. And as always, you can log on to the station homepage, www.nasa.gov/station, www.nasa.gov/station. Take a look on the left-hand side. You can see all kinds of photos and also tracking of the orbiting complex. If you've never had a chance to step outside and see what the space station looks like as it flies overhead above your hometown, we, of course, encourage you to do that. As we were mentioning, quite a bit of robotic activities happening outside the International Space Station this week. The Kibo Laboratory also has its own robotic arm. It was checking out some power buses on the inside of it to make sure that it's operating as expected today. And the crew also checked out some of the controls of it, making sure that those arms were operating as expected. Here's a view of Chris Cassidy actually inside Kibo. This view is from the Kibo robotic arm looking inside the space station itself. So we will take a look at this video here as Cassidy worked inside the Japanese laboratory.
Copy all. And we also confirm all the checkout you did by telemetry, and thank you for giving us a joyful time for CP checkout. Everything is perfect. That's great, and thank you very much. And just to let you know, from now we will start the ground activity for general mass checkout. When we finish after those activities, and when we are ready for your task, general mass deactivation prep, we will let you know. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go by your call rather than the timeline. Thanks for the heads up.
Thank you very much. Copy, Chris and Jax. Thank you very much. Jax is with you. Thank you.
Again, that was a look at Chris Cassidy inside the Kibo laboratory as he worked earlier this morning to help the Japanese team check out the robotic arm that's on the end of the Kibo laboratory itself. There's quite a bit of robots working on board the International Space Station this week, including that arm, but also Dexter, as we talked about at the top of the show, being put through the paces today and tomorrow, making sure that everything's working as expected. Here's a look at a camera on board Dexter. As we talked about today, they're going to be testing it to see if it can open up some of the bay doors on the outside of the station's truss, specifically the S0 truss that is sort of toward the middle of the station on the starboard truss, so they can open up these doors, access what's inside, and to test out if Dexter could be used to replace some of the parts that are in there. There's several different remote power control modules inside of there, which are part of the station's power structure. If they ever fail, they would need to be replaced, and of course that would require a spacewalk, but if Dexter could do that, it would save some time and energy on behalf of the crew, so that's why they're testing it out. But as we talked about, that activity will continue throughout today, and then tomorrow they're going to be testing to see if Dexter can be used to remove some bolts using a different technique than what is typical, and then on Friday Dexter will be stowed back into its safe configuration. Let's now head out to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where our friend Lori Meggs is standing by live. Lori, things look slightly different out there in Marshall today.
They sure do, Josh. The Payload Operations Integration Center recently underwent a little facelift, and now this room is equipped to do just about anything. Joining me now, someone who knows a lot about that, is Rick Rodriguez. He is the Payload Operations Manager for Expedition 36 here. And Rick, first of all, before we start talking about the room, let's talk a little bit about the accomplishments of Expedition 36 so far. We're about a month in. Tell us what's been going on.
Well, we've been very lucky. We have a crew up there that is extremely hardworking and really gung-ho about everything. So they're just doing every bit of science we can throw at them, and we're throwing a lot of it at them. So it's been a lot of science that we've accomplished in that 1 month.
Let's talk a little bit about specific experiments. Okay. I know you've had a lot of fun with one, surface telerobotics.
Yeah, that one. It's a experiment that we just started last week, and it's where the astronaut on the station drives a rover that's on a field at Ames Research Center in California, and so it's a remote control rover. It's an experiment within an experiment, which is cool because Chris, the astronaut on station, never saw it before. He never got trained on it, and so it's the first time he learned on station. He did a little conversation with the scientists on the ground, and then he just went right to it, and he had a lot of fun driving that rover around.
I bet, every boy's dream. But, you know, that's where you guys come in, too. You actually go to Houston and train the astronauts on the procedures for experiments. That's part of the job in here, but this one was different.
Yeah, well, we still developed all the procedures and helped the scientists and put together all the documentation that the crew uses, but we didn't get to train the crew in this case.
Right.
He did it all himself on orbit.
Let's talk a little bit about the racks and another experiment that used our microgravity science glove box. Let's talk about that.
We just finished doing an experiment called BASS, Burning and Suppression in Space. And that experiment is fun because we get to burn things. They're little samples. They're made of wax and things like wax. And we learn how the flames grow in space and how to put them out. So that's really important to figure out how do we do firefighting in space better than, trying to learn how to do it better than we know now.
Well, last Wednesday was a really special day for you guys here. You unveiled this beautiful new room. It's beautiful photograph on the back wall, nice backdrop for us, and a lot of dignitaries on hand, some important ones last week to unveil the new Payload Operations Integration Center. The ISS program manager was here, Marshall's center director and deputy director, and also the manager of the Mission Operations Laboratory was here. So it was a big event. But this room is not only beautiful, Rick, it's also functional. Tell us about how it is enhancing science.
Okay. The biggest thing you see when you walk into the room is the video wall. It's 24 monitors all put together, so it's like one big monitor. And it's great because it gives us a way to communicate better. It gives us a way to see more information, and the whole team gets to see it. So a couple of examples of what's on there that we use. One of them is what we call a fault summary display. If something happens on station, we get a message, and that fault summary display will pop up. And it actually is very apparent when it pops up. It's very bright. And so that all lets the whole room know, hey, something's happening. We need to pay attention. Right. So that's one. The other example is what we call an AOS-LOS display. AOS is acquisitional signal. That's when we have communication with the station. LOS is when we lose it. So we need to know that, because if we're working with the scientists and the crew members, then if they're coming up on an LOS period, it's really useful to know, because we can plan ahead and tell the crew, hey, we're going to lose you for 15 minutes. We'll be back on the other side. Here's what we want you to do. So it's very useful to have it right in front of us. And
cool countdown clocks. Right. Yeah. And you've changed the layout, too, of the room. You used to face the back wall. Now you face the video wall. And that's improved communications for you guys, right? Yeah.
A couple of things. It puts us all closer to the video. Before, the people in the back of the room really couldn't see the front wall, which is where we had the video. And so now we're all closer together. The other thing we did is we learned over the years that maybe one console operator needed to talk to another one, but they were all the way across the room. So we've learned which ones needed to be close together, and we moved the people around this time. So now they're all... It's better as far as which ones are closer to each other, and we can talk to each other easier.
And one other thing I want to point out are those cool signs back there. I need one for my office. Tell us, they're functional too, and they're not only pretty.
Right. Obviously, they have our names on it, our position names, but more importantly, they change colors. We can actually change the colors on them, and we're starting to learn how to use that as a communication tool. So, for instance, if we're doing a review, of a timeline or the crew's plan for tomorrow. We may tell the team, okay, you start out blue, which is the normal color, and you may tell the team, go green when you're good with the timeline, or go yellow if you have a comment. Right. So when the pod looks around the room, it's easy to say who's good or who's not, and we can concentrate on the people that need attention.
Well, we know how we feel about the room, but let's hear what International Space Station Program Manager Mike Suffredini, what he thought about it.
No, I love it. It's got a sense of, it's got the feel like you have control of everything. There's lots of displays, lots of data. We've added capability for more downlink, more comm channels, more video, and you get the sense it's all right here in front of you now. And that, to me, sort of rings of, you know, we're maximizing the use of the ISS, which of course is very important to us.
That's right. How does this room play a role in the whole and fit into the whole space station program?
So, as most people know, all of the research management is done here, and all of the USOS control of the facilities is done here, and the management of all the U.S. performed research is managed out of this facility. So with the conclusion of the last shuttle flight, we transitioned really at that point from assembly operations to payload operations. And so the focus kind of all switched to here in Huntsville. That's not to say there's not a lot of work going on in Houston to operate the systems and keep the systems going, but their focus really is to operate the systems as efficient as possible to provide the most time and capability to the research community so that they can get as much done on ISS. And so really, this does represent where we are all starting to focus our attention on. And so it's neat.
What's your vision for this room and the rest of the space station?
Well, my vision is that we fully utilize the ISS, and we've got a ways to go to fully utilize it. And that means maximize, to the extent you can, all the resources. Today, we pretty much maximize crew time, but we still got, that's not the only resource. A lot of research is done by commanding, by this very room, commanding of payloads on orbit. And we still have a ways to go to really fill up all the rack capacity, the stowage capacity, things like that on board ISS. So my dream is to fully utilize ISS, and I really believe when we're done utilizing ISS to the maximum extent possible, great things will be discovered on orbit that will really be a big benefit to us here on Earth. So I'm imagining this is going to be a very popular place.
And taking a live look inside this very popular place, Rick, we want to thank you. We know you've got a lot of work to do. We'll let you get back to all your Expedition 36 work. Congratulations on your new room.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for us from the Marshall Space Flight Center Payload Operations Integration Center. Now back to you, Josh, at Mission Control in Houston.
All right, thank you, Lori. Of course, if you would like to learn more about all the various facilities that help make up this International Space Station team, including Mission Control Houston, just log on to the NASA website at www.nasa.gov/station. You can take a tour of our facility here in Houston, also the different international partner facilities around the world, including Moscow and in Japan and in Europe and Canada as well.
Houston Station, lookout 2 for ATV cargo.
Station Houston, this is Nikhil, ready for the ATV cargo conference.
Copy. Yeah, let me get the rest of the team ready, and I'll be back with you in 1 minute.
Okay, and just want to let you know we have a brief 20-second handover in a minute, 20 seconds.
I copy that, Nikhil.
Hi, everybody. Josh Byerly here inside Mission Control Houston. I'm joined by my friend Liz Warren, who is part of the International Space Station Program Science Office. Liz is here because all this week and really all this month, again, we've been talking about the anniversaries of Valentina Tereshkova, which has been 50 years, and Sally Ride, which has been 30 years since those two landmark flights took place. But Liz, let's talk about science for a little bit. First of all, let's talk about your background. I've got I have to write it down over here. So you grew up in San Francisco, right?
Yes, I did.
You have a BS degree in molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology. Did I say that right?
You did.
And a doctoral degree in physiology, all from UC Davis. So you're a California girl. So let's talk about whenever you were going to school, junior high school. Like, when did you get involved in science? When did you sort of kind of get the bug, and how did that happen?
I think I was born with an insatiable curiosity. I think I always knew I was going to be a scientist because of that. My parents and my family encouraged me and fostered my interests, and I had some pretty great science teachers as well. In 7th grade in California growing up, I had a great science teacher, Mrs. PC, and then in high school, Miss Brumbaugh at Tamalpais High School. And then at UC Davis, I had a really wonderful science teacher that really challenged me and taught me how fun science can be, Barbara Horwitz at UC Davis.
So did you spend your entire time in California?
I did, and I arrived in Houston after getting my PhD about 9 years ago.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about this photo that we're looking at right now. You have a space shuttle on the back of your graduation gown. How did that happen?
Well, I knew where I was going. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to be working at NASA one day, and I think it's in part because of the achievements of Sally Ride and Valentina Tereshkova really blazing the trail. There was no doubt in my mind, just because I was a woman, that I'd be able to achieve my dreams as well.
So they sort of inspired you to kind of go into it. And whenever you,
absolutely,
I'm sure you talk to a lot of high school and junior high kids whenever you're out there, and the ones that are interested in science. How do you tell them what to figure out what they want to do? We talked to Camilla Lane yesterday about the same sort of thing. Like, how do they even know what they want to go into?
Well, careers in STEM, and particularly in science, are extremely rewarding, primarily because you're always learning something new, and that makes for an exciting career, always changing. And so to students, I say, stick with it. Sometimes sometimes education can be a little bit challenging, but that just makes it more fun.
Yeah.
And the number of doors that are open to you when you have skills in science, technology, engineering, and math are really limitless.
So you've done a lot of work here at NASA in terms of sort of how the human body reacts to being in space. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, when we watch people in zero gravity, it sure looks like a lot of fun, but microgravity...
That's you running on the treadmill there, right?
It is. That's me running on NASA's C9 aircraft, which allows 20 to 30 seconds of microgravity at a time. It flies
the Vomit Comet.
Well, yes. It's also known as the Vomit Comet. And, well, I tell students that these careers are really exciting and really fun. And my interest in microgravity really stems from the fact that the human body is fascinating on its own. But when we go to microgravity, a lot of the changes that occur are really not so good for us. Our bodies decondition pretty rapidly without gravity.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite experiments on the International Space Station is actually an experiment called integrated cardiovascular. And in essence, it studies the way that the heart deconditions during long-duration spaceflight. And I helped implement that experiment actually just down the hall here in Mission Control, working with the folks in the Payload Operations Integration Center as a scientist here at NASA. And one of my favorite parts of that experiment was operating an ultrasound device, which the astronauts used on orbit to take pictures of their heart, so we could actually see the changes that were occurring.
That's interesting. You know, we talk about the ultrasound a little bit because it's you know, one of the things I learned whenever I came here was that, you know, size and weight hugely matter whenever you take things up. And one thing the space station is doing is helping to sort of miniaturize, you know, the size of MRIs and ultrasounds and things such as that. Like, talk a little bit about that.
So the ultrasound device that is currently on orbit is actually a commercial off-the-shelf item that is very small, pretty much no larger than a laptop.
Yeah.
And we took that up on orbit with some slight modifications to make it usable in space. But technologies have been miniaturized largely because of NASA technology and the need to have smaller technologies and machinery. Thanks to NASA spin-offs, essentially.
So, final question: whenever you take a look at these anniversaries of Tereshkova and Ride, and you know, you look around at you know, the space station science team itself, you take a look at all these flight controllers in this room. I mean, this is a very diverse, you know, people from all walks of life, all over the world, and on all kinds of education backgrounds. You know, does that excite you, or is it just sort of normal now?
You know, I think it's actually pretty normal now. We do have a very diverse team here at NASA in particular. There are women astronauts, women flight controllers, women flight directors. Our center director is a woman. We have a woman up on the International Space Station right now, and these things don't make headlines. I think it's just expected now. The new astronaut class of 2013 is half women.
Yeah. And
while that did make some headlines because it was the first time that it happened, it really wasn't that surprising. That is more indicative of the number of applicants that are women, and the most qualified people are picked. So I think it says a lot.
Well, it's always good to talk to you. I appreciate you coming over here and spending some time here on the air with us.
Thank you.
Of course, if you'd like to learn more about the space station, all the different science experiments that the crew is currently working on, you can take a look at it by expedition or by discipline. Just log on to the NASA website at www.nasa.gov/station. Just look on the left-hand side of the page. You'll see research and technology there, and see all kinds of information there about what the crew is working on. So thanks again, Liz.
Thank you.
And Luca, as long as the foam is captured in the closeout photos, I think we can work with that. So if you can verify that you did take photos once you put the foam in there, then we're okay.
So all the foam is inside, except for one location that you will see in the pictures that you asked me for. And for the pictures, I also had a question today for Houston. I don't know if they passed it on. And the question was regarding step 2 alpha, where you initially gave me a specific rack to take pictures of. So I'm reading here ATV4 S1 rack, and then overhead 1, A1, and A2, and deck 1, Alpha 1, and Alpha 2. But then you send me on step Alpha, you send me to perform steps 1, 2, 3.1, 3.3, 3.5, and 4 of the 3.100 procedure, which asks to take pictures of the whole rack. So that was a little bit confusing.
Yeah, we apologize for that, Luca. The reason why we just needed those specific locations for overhead and deck is because when you mount bags on the S1 rack front, it blocks visibility to those overhead and deck locations. So for the next message we uplink, we'll make sure the rationale is clear on why we're asking you to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. And the pictures will be downloaded as soon as I free here, probably evening sometimes in the next couple of hours, if that's okay. And I don't have anything else unless you got something for me.
Yes, I have a couple items for you. First, in the daily summary, we referenced you to item 213, which is one of the crew provision bags in the PMM P1 aft location. Did you get a chance to stow that in ATV?
Let me check that.
Copy.
So, Nicole, we haven't got 13 yet.
You have not done it yet. Did I copy correctly?
It's correct. We have not covered 213 yet.
Okay. I think you probably filled that location with foam, but if it's still empty, our intention was to put 213 in ATV4, Sierra 1, Echo 2. So if that location's still empty, you can go ahead and put 213 there before you put the rack front bags on top of it.
Okay, we copy.
And if you do that...
And we had a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yes, just something else that came up. We got rid of a lot of towels and a lot of dry wipes, and we were wondering if there's new provisions coming in with ATV4 before we throw all the trash away.
Yes, that is correct. There's a lot of new provisions coming up on ATV4, and some of the crew provisions we're holding off until HTV4 gets there. So there's a lot of crew provisions coming up on these next few vehicles, and everything we're throwing away we are replacing.
Copy that.
Okay, one more thing about item 213. When you do put that bag in ATV4 S1 rack, make sure to take a photo of it so we can make sure we're tracking it accurately.
Copy, and it will be done. I'll take a note right now.
Okay. Next question has to do with step 3 in the choreography message, and that's items 86.2 through 86.4. We asked you to stow some double cold bags in specific locations. I was wondering if you had the serial numbers for which double cold bag you put in which location.
Yes, sir. I do have them. Let me get the paper.
And Serena, while we have you, Aaron and I are in step 11.5.5, and the suits both passed their leak checks, but we didn't notice the digital value of the suit prior to the start, and so I can't remember how to get the delta. It was.
This is Mission Control Houston. This is some more footage from earlier this morning as Chris Cassidy and Karen Nyberg worked inside the Quest airlock to get ready for the upcoming spacewalks on July 9th and July 16th. They've got some items they need to take care of to get the spacesuits and the tools ready to go for that activity. Another reminder, on July 2nd, we'll have a news conference here at the Johnson Space Center at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, to take a look at what's ahead for both of those 6.5-hour spacewalks on both those days.
station on Space Ground 2.
Go ahead, Karen.
We are complete with the procedure 360320, and we're looking for a go for the O2 config at the end of the procedure.
Checking. And Karen, you will go for both steps in the O2 config procedure.
Copy that. Thank you.
And Station Houston on 2 for Chris. Whenever you're ready, we are privatized on Space to Ground 4.
This is Mission Control Houston. This Orbit 2 team continuing to watch over the systems on board the International Space Station. Brian Smith there sitting in the middle. He is today's flight director. Serena Anand there is the Capcom. She's the one that's been talking to the crew throughout today's activities. The crew is making fairly good progress through their timeline today. They have a few more tasks later on today. They've got their typical exercise sessions, and then Kara Nyberg has got some more tool configuration to take care of inside the Quest Airlock. You saw footage of that just a few minutes ago. And then they'll have their daily planning conference later on this afternoon where they'll talk to the ground teams here in Houston and around the world and look ahead to what is going on tomorrow. Before we wrap up things here for Space Station Live, we want to remind you that coming up on July 2nd at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have the Expedition 36 spacewalk briefing. That'll take a look at both of the spacewalks for July 9th and July 16th. That'll air at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. There's Chris Cassidy. He'll be the lead spacewalker for that day. Luca Parmitano, this will be his first time. He'll be the first Italian to go outside the space station and do a spacewalk. He'll be what they call EV2, or spacewalker number 2. They've got quite a bit of tasks they're going to be taking care of outside the space station. A lot of it is some power cable routing and some other items, also some radiator grapple bar work that they're going to be doing, but all of those details will be in that briefing at 1 p.m. Central Time on July 2nd. The robotic activities for Dexter are also continuing today and will go on for a few more hours. Again, Dexter is being tested today on the end of the station's robotic arm. They are checking out Dexter to see if it can open up some of the bay doors you see there on the outside of the truss structure of the station. This would be used to open up those doors and replace some parts that are part of the station's power structure. And then tomorrow they're going to be trying to remove some bolts using Dexter just to make sure that it is working as expected. And then on Friday they will store that robot away and put it in a safe configuration. That is going to wrap it up for us here on Space Station Live for Wednesday. Again, we will see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time here on NASA Television. As always, for the latest information on the International Space Station, including all of the science on board, just log on to the NASA website at www.nasa.gov/station. Once again, www.nasa.gov/station. Look on the left-hand side. You will see Research and Technology, and there you can find all the different experiments. And also look lower on the left-hand side of the page, and you'll see some tracking data for the International Space Station, including where the station currently is, as well as when you can find it above your hometowns. Once again, www.nasa.gov/station. That wraps it up for us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. This is Mission Control Houston.